بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا تأويل وجعلنا من خيرة أمة سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. We seek Allah's protection from knowledge that does not benefit, from a heart that has no khushu, from a nafs that's never had enough, from an eye that does not tear, and from a dua that's not heard. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we continue with the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, life of the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, and lessons that we can learn from this. We've started slightly early. I want to start a bit earlier, but I thought people will probably got 7:30 in the mind because we have Maghrib, which is a bit early, so the lesson will probably get short, and I have a lot to kind of get through, inshallah, today. So we spoke about the Battle of Khandaq, Battle of the Trench, or Battle of Azab, which one you call it, the Confederates. You have in those days, kind of wars took place only during the day, and both sides would kind of rest in the evening. Okay, but at the trench things were different. It was very difficult to tell when and how the enemy would attack. On the one hand, the army of Ahzab was looking for opportunity to cross the trench, at a weak point, and on the other hand, you got the Banu Qurayza. Banu Qurayza were kind of conspiring, okay, and we're going to touch upon that a bit later. Well, I suppose we've already spoke about that last week. So then you had that kind of turning point when Nu'aym came into the picture. And he spoke about how, something has happened to him. Allah Ta'ala placed this kind of into his heart, and he became Muslim, and he said to the Prophet ﷺ, instruct me, what shall I do? And then he went to the one side and he said, look, they're planning this, and he went to the other side. So there was this kind of mistrust between the two sides. Okay? So like I said, we covered all that. I won't go into the detail, but that's a kind of a summary of what's happening. And then you had the kind of the help, the assistance from the divine, with those winds, and we described the hadith on the winds. And funny enough, actually, the description I gave about the winds, I said, when we go on Umrah or Hajj, you sometimes see the weather change drastically in the Haram. Okay. And we mentioned this just to give an idea of how the experience was. And I said, look, this is kind of in the city where you've got buildings, where you've got tarmac, you've got there's no desert. And look how difficult it becomes then. Imagine how it would have been in the desert. And we spoke about that last week, and a few days later, or I think it was literally the day after, was it? Or 2 days later, you had these thunderstorms and these winds that took place in the Haram. And there's all these videos of items kind of flying past, and people, they just can't control. They're kind of being, pushed across as well. Everyone's trying to grab onto something. You had a lightning strike and all that, how the weather changed. And subhanAllah, like I said, we just spoke about it last week, and we got that, for those that were listening to the lesson. And I did share it on some of the groups. I said, look, we were just speaking about this. Here's the context. And look at this. Now you can imagine how the situation was at Khandaq. That situation where tents were just flying all over, pots were flying over, and then the Quraysh decided enough's enough. And off they went. Abu Sufyan said, enough's enough, off he went. Okay? So then you had that kind of 25 to 2 days to a month of the Battle of Khandaq, which was more like a siege, I suppose, as well. And, you know, there was very little battle that took place, but it was very, very difficult. Okay, as I mentioned at the start, you know, a battle kind of usually battles a few hours. Here you go, done, dusted, move on. Or a battle takes place during the day, and if it was something that's going to go over a number of days, then you rest at night, etc. And okay, let's kick back off again during the day. But here it wasn't. You have to be on your toes throughout. There was so much concerns, okay, because you had women and children, and then you had this treachery from the Banu Qurayza. Okay, you had that treachery from there, and you had so much on the Prophet ﷺ's mind, so much he had to think about. Okay. Then we spoke about, after that, they're returning back and saying that Jibreel comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says that, you know, you've all put down your weapons, but we've not put our weapons down. We, as in the angels, have not put their weapons down. You know, and he directs them and he says that, you know, head towards Banu Qurayza. You know, our next journey is Banu Qurayza. Let's go. We're ready to fight with Banu Qurayza for what they did. Okay, for what they did. And then last week we spoke about the siege of Banu Qurayza. Okay, we spoke about the siege. Now, before the Prophet ﷺ arrived in Medina, okay, a person from Banu Qurayza was not considered equal to a person from Banu Nadir. Okay, remember you had these kind of tribes. So Banu Qurayza, Banu Nadir's already been kind of banished away. You know, they had to leave. They went to Khaybar, and this was it. This is why the leader came along and said, "Look, this is an opportunity to get back in, get back to at the Muslims and get back our what is ours, our land and our kind of wealth, etc." So the Banu Qurayza was not seen as equal to Banu Nadir, so such that when the Banu Qurayza had to pay life, when you came to the Banu Qurayza, they had to pay kind of life for life. But when a person from Banu Nadir was killed by them, it was a kind of life for life. Whereas if the Banu Nadir killed one of the, they killed one of the Banu Qurayza, they kind of got away with by just paying the blood money. Okay, so the Banu Qurayza had been a tribe that was kind of socially inferior among the Jews, and the Prophet ﷺ came along, and he gave them the same status as the Banu Nadir. Okay, he did not distinguish between them. He didn't say, okay, you know what, you're like a small tribe, you're inferior, you're greater. No, they were all equal. He gave them those rights. He came along, he gave them those rights. Okay. And I'm mentioning this because you can understand, look, so many things that were, had changed when the Prophet ﷺ came. Okay. He made the society, the rights, etc. Everything was the same for everyone. Anyway, back to the fortress. So the Banu Qurayza, they decide, okay, you know what, we'll surrender. After what's happened, and we spoke about Abu Lubaba as well, we spoke about the pillar of Tawbah and all that. Okay. So back there, so they decide to surrender. Okay. And one of the kind of Banu Qurayza men, Amr ibn Soda, officially, he disassociates himself from his people. I'm not really sure if this took place right before the siege was to end or kind of earlier on in the siege. But regardless, he kind of disassociates himself from the tribe or from his people. So kind of he distanced himself from his people. He distanced for they broke the pact with the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, he suggests to his kind of clansmen that they embrace the Prophet ﷺ's religion, or at least pay the Prophet ﷺ kind of a yearly tribute. Okay, but the majority of Qurayza kind of refused both ideas, stating that they would rather be killed, than pay tribute to the Arabs. So faced with no option, Amr and another kind of clansman, Rifa ibn Samal, they kind of escaped to join Sayyidina Ali's army. Okay, another version is that he comes out the night before, and he was left to go. When he come out and he was kind of confronted by the army, the Muslim army, he mentioned that he's disassociating himself from these lot. So they allowed him to go, and he went off to Medina. but then he kind of disappeared. Okay, the following day he disappeared, and no one knows what happened to him. And the Prophet ﷺ said about him, so that was a man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved because of his honesty. Okay, saved because of his honesty. Okay, now this is important, as the punishment was not because of who they were, but what they did. Okay, and I'm going to stress this time and time again. It was not because of who they were, it was because of what they did. Okay, it was because of what they did. So the next morning, word comes out that they are willing to surrender. Okay, and what happens is that Aus surround the Prophet ﷺ, pleading with the Prophet ﷺ to spare them. Okay, one mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ let the Khazraj tribe leave, meaning Abdullah ibn Ubay, when he approached the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so what is this basically? You had this, remember we spoke about before, you have the Aus and the Khazraj who would fight amongst themselves, and before the Prophet ﷺ came. And then you had these Jewish tribes, they made alliances with certain other ones. So you had the Khazraj was with Banu Nadir, and the Aus, they were with Banu Qurayza. Okay, and this is important here. Okay, so remember this is something important here, that Aus were linked with or had alliances with Banu Qurayza, and Khazraj, they had it with Banu Nadir. So when you had Abdullah ibn Ubay, when the Prophet, when Banu Nadir did when they were treacherous, Abdullah ibn Ubay came to the Prophet, let my people go. Okay, let them go. And the Prophet said, oh, go, let them, take them, go. Okay. Now what's happening is that they're also now coming and they're saying to the Prophet ﷺ, and see, when we say that, you're talking a lot about the hypocrites. Okay, the hypocrites are pushing for it for that sake, really. So they're saying, for our sake. So you did it for Abdullah ibn Ubay's sake, the Hazraj. Now it's the Aus's turn. For our sake, spare them. However, there was a big difference between what the Banu Nadir did and what Banu Qurayza did. Okay, there was a big difference. Now look at the justice of the Prophet ﷺ. He says to the Aus, okay, would you be happy if one of your own decides their faith? And they all got happy. They said, yeah, straight away. They go, yeah, that's it. That's what we want, sorted. That's what we wanted. Okay, they accepted. So then the Prophet ﷺ chose Sayyidina Saad ibn Muad, their own leader. Okay, and we're going to talk, inshallah, we're going to describe Banu Qurayza, then we're going to, if we get time, hopefully we will, because it's important. I want to talk a bit about Sayyidina Saad ibn Muad. Okay, he says, okay, your own leader then, their own leader. Okay, so remember what has happened to Sayyidina Saad. He's badly wounded. You have this arrow, the spear that was thrown, and it's his arm, and it's burst an artery or something, but it was something that's really bad, because the descriptions given is that she's got blood spurting all over the place when it was struck. Okay, and I'm just going to narrate a long hadith here, and then we're going to talk a bit about it. The hadith narrated by Sayyidina Aisha, and this says, Saad was wounded on the day of Khandaq, i.e. the trench, when a man from Quraysh called Hibban ibn al-Araqa hit him with an arrow. The man was Hibban bin Qais from the tribe of Bani Mais bin Amir bin Luay, who shot an arrow at Saad's medial arm vein, or main artery of the arm. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ pitched a tent for Saad in the mosque so that he might be near to the Prophet ﷺ to visit. Okay, and they say that the Prophet ﷺ would visit him every day and spend time with him, ask him on his, how are you, and check on his health. He spent so much time on it. Okay, and this, like I said, imagine more and more we're going to talk about Sayyidina Saad and his status and how great a person he was. Okay. When the Prophet continue with the hadith, when the Prophet returned from the Battle of Khandaq, i.e. trench, and laid down his arms and took a bath. Gabriel came to him while he, i.e. Gabriel, was shaking the dust off his head and said, "You have laid down the arms. By Allah, I have not laid down them. Okay, go out to them to attack them." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Where?" And Gabriel pointed towards Bani Qurayza. So Allah's Messenger ﷺ went to them, i.e. Bani Qurayza, and he kind of besieged them. They then surrendered to the Prophet ﷺ's judgment, but he directed them to Saad to give his verdict concerning them. Saad said, "I give my judgment that their warriors should be killed, their women and children should be taken as captives, and their properties distributed." And narrated to Hisham, "My father informed me that Sayyidina Aisha said, Saad said, O Allah, you know that there is nothing more beloved to me than to fight in your cause against those who disbelieved your apostle and turned him out." I say, like, got rid of him out, threw him out of Mecca. Okay, let's say threw him out, but kind of forced him to leave Mecca. "O Allah, I think you have put to an end the fight between us and them, i.e. Quraysh. And if there still remains any fight with the Quraysh, then keep me alive till I fight against them for your sake. But if you have brought the war to an end, then let this wound burst and cause my death thereby." So blood gushed from the wound. There was a tent in the mosque belonging to Banu Ghifar, who were surprised by the blood flowing towards them. They said, "O people of tent, what is this thing which is coming to us from your side?" Behold, blood was flowing profusely out of Saad's wound. Saad then died because of that. Narrated Sayyid Bukhari. Okay. Another narration, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who said that some people, the Jews of Banu Qurayza, came down at the command of Saad bin Muaz. He was called and he came riding a donkey. Okay, he came riding a donkey. When he approached the mosque, the Prophet ﷺ said, this is important, when he approached the mosque, the Prophet ﷺ said, rise up for one better than you, kind of rise up for your leader, or kind of, he said, rise up for your chief. Okay, the title of today's lesson. Now, I think it's the only person that Prophet ﷺ has commanded our companions to stand up for him. Okay, so stand up for your leader. So he's approaching there. So remember, so in the Saad, so just quick recap on the hadith. So he's going to go through exactly what happens. So Sayyidina Saad is brought when he says Saad will be your judge. Okay, so he was brought. He came on a donkey. He was so weak, then he was kind of carried in, and as he was being brought in, the Prophet ﷺ told, these people said, rise for your leader, rise for the one better than you, rise for your chief. Okay? He's never commanded anyone to do that, rise for anyone or stand for anyone. Okay, he never says that. Okay? So when Saad was brought, the kind of Aus surrounded him, the kind of hypocrites, they surrounded him, trying to influence his decision. Okay, this, you're one of us and they're one of us and we got alliances and, forgive them. They've learned the lesson or whatever now. Okay. Saad said, now is the time for Saad to not care about any criticism. So, he's on his deathbed. Okay. He doesn't care what people will say after him. Okay. So he'll be just. And then kind of those around him realized what was going to happen. They all knew what the decision was going to be, but they were trying their best to influence it, get him to change. Okay, and so then Saad said to his people, would you accept any judgment that I give? They agreed. Yes, we will. Okay, he then turned towards a group amongst whom the Prophet ﷺ was sitting. Okay, so he was not able to kind of look at the Prophet ﷺ directly. So gazing down, he says, those who are present. So look at the adab, mashallah. Okay, subhanallah. He's not looking. He didn't look direct to the Prophet ﷺ and saying, you're going to also accept my judgment. He looks towards that area where the Prophet ﷺ is sitting. So as in he's looking towards the people, head down, and says, those who are present here must likewise be content with the decision I take. And all said that they are content. The Prophet ﷺ says, we agree with your decision. Okay, and then the decision came, to that men will be killed, women and children held captive, land be distributed among the Muhajir, and property should be distributed among the Muslims. Okay. As soon as he gives the kind of command, all those around him, the hypocrites, they start cursing him, this and that. But he gave his decision. Okay, the commandment was given to perform the execution. The male adults were taken in batches and executed. Okay, there was one of them that kind of wore his finest clothes, and he kind of tied them to himself with strings. So he wore his most beautiful clothes, and he tied his clothes to himself with strings, so no one can take them from his body after his death. And when he passed the Prophet ﷺ, he looked at him and he said that, I have never regretted my animosity towards you. Okay, but whoever Allah humiliates, that is the real one who is humiliated. So even if even if he knew, but still they had this kind of, they all knew, obviously, and we described when Qab, their leader, gave them options, and they rejected. They knew that he is the Prophet, but they still had this arrogance. Okay, and Qab himself was similar, but not as arrogant. He said, "Look, I will die upon the faith of my people." There was some blaming among them, they were blaming each other, this and that. But Huyay, remember Huyay, who was also amongst them, he also was there. He fled and he kind of joined them, and he said, "Look, there's no point blaming each other now." Okay, the Prophet ﷺ told the companions to not take them out for execution during the day when it's so hot. So he said, don't punish them double, don't punish them with both heat of the sun and heat of the sword. Okay, one of the things mentioned actually when the Saad kind of gave that decision, the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts your decision. So you gave the decision of what Allah Ta'ala's decision was. Okay, so kind of confirmed that he gave the correct decision. Okay, there was only one woman that was killed, Nubata. So what happened is at that time during the siege, her husband kind of convinced her. He said, "Look, they'll end up killing us, but then you'll be spared." Okay, so for us to be together, he convinced her to kill one of the Muslims. So the companions were resting close to the fortress. She got a big stone and she threw it from the top, and it killed one of the companions. And so it was saying that Aisha kind of narrates this, that saying that Aisha, when her name was called, so she was there. So Aisha was there amongst with the women, children, and she said that Aisha says that Nubata was with her, and she was all very happy and this and that, and then her name is called for execution. Her name is called, and then Aisha's surprised. First of all, why is her name called? And she tells the story, "Oh, my husband has killed me, or my husband told me to do this, and then we'll be together." But she was all merry and she was really happy. And so Aisha mentions that I was surprised at how happy she was, even though she knew she was about to be killed. Okay, that was the only woman that was killed. When they entered the fortress, and actually, there's actually a narration about the Prophet ﷺ entering the fortress of Banu Qurayza on a donkey with humility. And we see this later on as well. It's so much humility the Prophet ﷺ has. Okay, it's not a case of like Hajjigin, and that's where the companions take it from. We have the famous story of Sayyidina Umar when he went to accept the keys of Masjid al-Aqsa, Jerusalem. The people in charge of the keys, they said, "Look, the only place we're going to give the keys to is the Khalifa, Sayyidina Umar." And Sayyidina Umar, when he entered with humility, okay, his clothes were patched up on the donkey, and actually he entered while walking, because it was the turn of his slave to be riding the animal. So he did not even enter on the animal. When he came, he was the one walking in, and his slave was actually on the animal. because it was the slaves' turn. This is what they would do. Look at that, subhanAllah. This was the leader of the Muslim Ummah, and the Muslim Ummah had kind of grown vastly. Okay, they all take this from the Prophet ﷺ. So when they entered the fortress and saw what the Jews owned, they saw that they had 1,000, and some of the descriptions are given, so numbers can vary, but different variations on this. But this particular narration was that they had 1,500 swords, 300 armor, 2,000 spears, 1,500 shields, and many more weaponry. All this showed what kind of attitude they had, okay, towards the believers, and these had been kept in stock to be used against the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, there was a small number of camels and sheep, and they were kind of confiscated. Apart from that, there were many pots and pans and barrels of spirit. All these would be spilt with the order of the Prophet ﷺ, and no one would touch them. Okay, now there's a big difference in terms of the numbers. Okay, so let's just talk a bit about now this here. So there's a big difference in terms of the numbers. Some put out, some kind of, I suppose, some doubt on IBISak's version that all the adult males were executed. Okay, as we don't have anything like that from the Quran and the Hadith, and kind of this section says that the number could not be more than 25. Okay, the Quran speaks of some being killed and some taken prisoner, while the two Hadith traditions speak of executing their fighters and imprisoning their offsprings, and there's all this happening. Okay, so there's several points here, and my job is here just to kind of get the message out there. Okay, and I'm not saying, oh, this person's right and this person's wrong. I'm just giving different versions. Okay, I'm just giving there are difference of opinion, and everyone, we're entitled to the difference of opinions. I just want to give all the different opinions. So you have several points in IBISak's report which call it into question. To start with, he mentions that prior to their execution, the men were placed in Usama ibn Zayd's house, while the women were placed in Aisha bint al-Harith's home. Now, how many people could these two homes accommodate? Okay, the number of the Bani Qurayza men mentioned in these reports range between 600 to 900. Okay, so what sort of home would take all those people? Okay, so some of the kind of, you've got to look at it, there's this kind of difference when it came down to it. So this was kind of like an act of treachery in war, and if you look at a bit of a conclusion, this was an act of treachery, and in war, this kind of punishment is acceptable in any civilization. Even today, okay, treason in times of martial law is punishable by death. Okay, it was treason against the state. In modern terms, this was treason against the state. The Prophet ﷺ was the most compassionate of people when compassion was warranted. But when justice was warranted, an example had to be set. Okay, he's responsible for the city of Medina. Time and time again, he gave these opportunities. Okay, so no doubt that this incident is discussed with so much negativity. Okay, even the biggest critics cannot say that this was done due to who they were. I mentioned this at the start. They can't say it was done because of who they were. If so, it's just a lie. Because when you look at it academically, even the Banu Qurayza were not surprised with Saad's judgment. Look at what happened to the other two tribes. Then on top of this, you have the fact that they were kind of warned 3 times. The treaty was renewed again and again. Look how many opportunities the Prophet ﷺ gave them. Okay, look how many opportunities he gave them. The fact that they wanted to kill the women and children. Imagine if they wanted to kill the women and children. I mean, I can't remember if I mentioned it because we were going through it so much, so fast. Kind of, there were certain aspects that I kind of left aside. But there was an incident that took place where they actually came to the fortress, and the narrations given is that Hassan ibn Thabit is there. He's a poet. Okay, Hassan is a poet, and he just froze. So he was not a fighter, he just froze. Okay, he could not defend them. So someone entered, and the description given Safiya to the Prophet ﷺ, she hid behind the door, and she then attacked the one person. However, she attacked him, killed him, and she grabbed his body and threw him out the kind of window, or whatever you want to say. And the body comes flying down, or whatever it was, and the remainder, they see this and they all get scared, thinking, oh, there's an army here as well, because they were under the illusion that, oh, it's only women and children, no one there to defend them, let's go and attack them. Okay, but then after that they thought, wait a minute, is there army there? So then they ran off. So they had this intention, they wanted to kill the women and children. Okay, now the problem is, when this incident is mentioned, the whole episode of Khandaq is ignored. So we've spent 3 lessons, okay, so over 3 hours speaking about Khandaq, okay, and we could go on a bit even more than that. But when people are narrating this incident, they ignore everything before this. So they won't talk about all of that Khandaq. It's not even mentioned. Okay, the context leading up to it, it's not even mentioned. Okay, this is important. Now, the thing was that it was the judgment of their own allies. The Prophet ﷺ gave, so it was their own ally, the leader of their own allies, he gave the judgment. And according to Martin Nings, saying the Saad's decision to execute was not unexpected, as it was in accordance with the Jewish law. So some narrations is that Saad said that he goes, I'm going to give the decision based on their law. So based on the Jewish law. But some is that he didn't specifically say that, he gave the narration, the decision. But when you look at it, the decision was based on Jewish law. So Jewish law is that this is Jewish law. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. So if they accept, if they offer them peace, and if they accept it, then get them to open the gate and then forced labor. They're slaves. That's if they accept. They become slaves. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to the city, when the Lord, your God delivers it into your hands, put to the sword all of them in it. As for the women and children, the livestock and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves, and you may use the plunder the Lord, your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all the cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. Okay, women and children were kind of sent to, that's the Jewish law kind of element. So Saad did it based on their law itself. Okay, so the women and children were sent to Khaybar. Okay, this is the most contested of the Seerah. Okay, this is the most contested. So this is, so much is kind of spoken about this incident. Okay, like I said, there's different views. I think Malik called this story a lie. He goes, whoever told it is the Dajjal. To that extent. Some authors say only the leaders were executed. Okay, so like I said, there's a difference there. Some say it's only the leaders that were executed. Some was like only certain the ones that fought were executed. Some have the number of about 25 to 30 were only executed, like that. There's a difference in there. Even if we go with the, they were all, because all the men were executed, it still was within what would have been allowed. Okay, it was still justice. Basically, it was still justice. Okay, so the lessons that we learn from this, Sheikh Ramadan Bhuti mentions some lessons and principles. Okay, Imam Muslim, under the heading for war against Banu Qurayza, peace agreements, treaties and covenants of mutual protection must be respected by Muslims under all circumstances. And he says, unless the other party to such a pact take the kind of initiative to violate them, in which case it's permissible for Muslims to go to war against them if they see it in the best interest of the Muslim community. Okay, so that was the incident of Banu Qurayza. Okay, a topic, like I said, it's discussed so much negativity on the back of that. You need to look at everything. You look at the Khandaq and the Banu Qurayza incident has to be looked at together. Understand exactly what happened. Okay, understand what was it. Time and time they renewed their treaty. They were on the side of the Prophet ﷺ. The Medina was being defended, and they turned their back on them. They were like, here you go, and they went against them. Okay, they went against the Muslims, and this is important. Okay, to understand that. It's important to understand. Like I said, when we and I've mentioned this so many times, whenever these controversial topics come up, we deal with them. We speak about them head on. We don't kind of like try to brush it under the carpet and hide it off. Oh no. Oh, it's not true, whatever. Because people want answers. We're here to give answers. We have nothing to hide. Inshallah. What I want to finish on. We've got about 10 minutes for Maghrib. And it's not enough because you can speak about this person so much. Now, if you remember, I mentioned at the start that when we're covering the Seerah, I want to try and cover some of these kind of characters around the Prophet ﷺ as well. Okay, and this is, I remember when I spoke to my teacher about this, when I said I'll be doing the Seerah, I want to go into detail, but all these additional characters within there, I want to kind of spend time on them, let people know how they are. The wives of the Prophet ﷺ, the children of the Prophet ﷺ, there's some of these men around the Prophet ﷺ. You have the 4 Khalifas, okay? But then all these other ones. And this is what I've been trying to do time and time again. A certain companion, when we mention, I speak about them, okay? And that's the same thing with Saad ibn Muad. I've spoke about him previously. But again now, so when I say everyone knows the Seerah, surprisingly actually, because I'm teaching the kids at the masjid, I've started teaching them on Fridays. Mom wanted me to kind of, Islamic studies and different age groups, and I asked them the question. Okay, so when we did, at what age was the Prophet ﷺ when there was the first revelation? At what age was the Prophet ﷺ when there was migration? At what age was the Prophet ﷺ when he passed away? And no one knew the answer. I mean, maybe they knew the answer. They're just people a bit shy. Kids are shy. But so these are important things that we need to know anyway. So when it comes to the Seerah, we need to know this. Okay, so we know certain aspects. We know the Prophet ﷺ when he was born. We know about revelation. We know about migration, Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, all this. We know about this. But what I want you to do is go that much extra, go into so much more detail, talk about those characters around. Okay, and Saad ibn Muad is one of those. Okay, immensely. I mean, the amount of respect that's shown. The Prophet ﷺ telling people to stand for your leader. Okay, stand for your leader. He's loved so much. Okay, and we spoke about Sayyidina Saad in the past, but we spoke about when Musab was sent by the Prophet ﷺ to Medina. Remember who Saad was? Saad was the leader of Aus. He was the leader. And think about this actually. Think about this. Abdullah ibn Ubay, he went against the Prophet ﷺ because he was considered to be the next king of Medina. And he thought, you know what? He's taken my position. Look at Saad. Potentially he was one of those king's chiefs, or potentially to be a king. If he wanted, he could have gone to the same route as Abdullah and said that, you know what, I can't allow him to come in and become a leader. But no, he didn't. He changed. His heart changed. So when Musab came, and remember the story, and I'm not going to go over it because we don't have the time, but we've already covered it. He sent someone, you know what, they're causing problems, go sort it out. This person went, and this person changed himself. And then he went back and he said to Saad that, you know what, you probably need to go. They're going to be doing something to your cousin. There's issues. And he went there angry, thinking, what's going on, like kind of, what's happening here. You got to do your job yourself. And then Musab said, look, sit down. Just listen to us. If you don't like it, we'll go. He sat down, and this is where his heart changed. He was the chief. Okay? He went back to his tribe, and he says, oh, my people, what it is, what's my position among you? Okay? They said, you are our chief. You are our, you're the best of us. You're the most noble of us. Okay? Sayyidina Saad said, I swear by Allah, I will not speak to any man. Say, look, none of you come and speak to me. I don't want to speak to any man, woman, and child amongst you unless you enter this religion within a week. The entire tribe had converted to Islam. Now, Sayyidina Saad, you know what? He was not that old. At that point, his age was 31 years old. So he was considered one of the seniors, and considered one of the seniors does not mean you're old. Some people are kind of, I suppose, born leaders. They take charge. They lead the community. People look to them for leadership. Sayyidina Saad was one of those. Okay, at a young age, but he was a leader. A leader. He was a chief amongst his people. Okay. Like I said, they all converted to Islam. Then you have other instances before the battle. When you have that council before the Battle of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ is asking, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And it was the Muhajir that kept speaking. Muhajir kept speaking. Because remember, the treaty, the treaties you got was for the Ansar to protect the Prophet ﷺ, defend the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, not kind of go out and have a battle. So they were within their rights to say, we're not going to go and fight. 2/3 of them were the Ansar. But the Prophet ﷺ kept mentioning, and that's when Sayyidina Saad stood up. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, it seems like you're directing and you're asking us. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, we're always with you. We're with you regardless. We're here to fight with you. You give us command and we'll do that. Okay, and this brought so much joy to the Prophet ﷺ. Then you have Battle of Uhud, when protecting the Prophet ﷺ, he was there all the time. You have Khandaq, during Khandaq, saying that Aisha comments actually. So what happens is that Sayyidina Saad goes to visit his mother at the fortress, and as he's leaving, Sayyidina Aisha narrates this, that she says, oh, if only he had armor all over, to protect his arms, because he had one of those kind of body shield. She goes, only if he had armor to protect his arms. And this was the thing, because he gets wounded, the spear it's his arm that gets injured. Okay, so saying the Saad's wound kind of became worse with each passing day. One day the Prophet ﷺ visited Sayyidina Saad and found him at the verge of death. So he kind of cradled his head in his lap and called upon Allah. Oh Allah, our Lord, Saad has striven hard in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He believed in your Prophet and did his very best. So please do accept his soul with goodly acceptance. The words of the Prophet ﷺ fell like coolness on the departing soul. Sayyidina Saad kind of strove to open his eyes, hoping that the last face he saw would be the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, peace be upon you, Prophet. I do witness that you are indeed the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, when he passed away, angels were present, and there's so many beautiful descriptions of this about angels. We're short on time. We probably can. I'll see if maybe next week I might do some, a bit more on it for the first 10 minutes or so. But we don't have time at this point. The Prophet ﷺ took a kind of farewell look of Sayyidina Saad's face and said, rejoice, Abu Umar. Abu Sayyid al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him, said, I was one of those who dug Saad's grave, and each time we dug out a layer of sand, we smelt musk. Okay, one narration, when he was being carried, the companion said that Saad was kind of a heavily built man. So Sayyidina Saad was a heavily built man, and one of the narrations is when they were carrying his coffin, it was so light. The hypocrites were kind of, oh yeah, he's not much of a man, is he, and this and that. And the companion said, oh, is this because of the judgment he passed on Banu Qurayza, and the Prophet ﷺ replied, no, I swear by he who holds my life in his hand, that Saad is being carried by angels. Okay, that's why he was so light for the companions, because Saad is being carried by the angels. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ says to Sayyidina Saad at his grave, Jazakallah, you're the leader of the people. You have fulfilled your promise, and Allah will fulfill His promise to you. Okay, all the companions were surrounding him when he was getting buried, and the Prophet ﷺ was so sad. He began to say Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. All the companions said it also. You have this kind of echoing all over. Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, Allahu Akbar. Okay, Allahu Akbar. Why the change? And you have this powerful hadith narrated by Sayyidina Jabir. I heard the Prophet ﷺ saying, the throne of Allah shook at the death of Saad bin Muad. Through another group of narrators, Jabir added, I heard the Prophet ﷺ saying, the throne of the beneficent shook because of the death of Saad bin Muad. Say Bukhari. Okay? And why is it that he was shook? It's like the happiness that he's now coming. Happiness coming. He was a martyr. Okay? He died because of the wounds of the battle. He was a martyr. Okay? There were some narrations that I wanted to read out, but maybe we'll start off next week with that. We'll just finish off on this garment. So the Prophet ﷺ kind of walked out, and he was wearing this beautiful garment. When foreigners would come and would come and gift him, and he looked so beautiful. And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is nothing compared to even a handkerchief of Saad in paradise. Okay, this is nothing compared to that. The Prophet ﷺ would speak about him so much. He was like, saying that Saad was kind of tall, broad man, fair skin, handsome with full beard. He died at the age of 37. Within 6 years, so he became Muslim for 6 years, but achieved so much, remembered for so much. Okay, I mentioned when we spoke about that long hadith. Within it, Saad made the dua, oh Allah, if it's like, if the Quraysh are still fighting, then give me life because I want to fight them. They fought, they kind of, drive out my prophet. Okay, so I want to fight them. But if not, then take my life. And there was no fighting after that. Khaybar as well. But actually now, and I was thinking about this actually, that there's only kind of a couple of events left now, main events. So we are getting closer to the end of the Seerah, and actually I got a bit emotional in the sense that we're getting close to the end of the Seerah. You always think about it, yeah, there's so much that we need to do, so much we need to cover, but we're getting closer and closer to the end. So there was no fighting after this. So it was a case of he was not needed now to fight, because he was a brave man. Young guy, passed away at the age of 37. The throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shook. Death of Sayyidina Saad. Subhanallah. We leave it at that. Inshallah, we'll probably narrate a few hadiths at the start of next week, because it is Maghrib time. It's going to be over. But inshallah, we'll continue next week. Inshallah, that's been beneficial to everyone. And we leave it at that. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi rahmatihi ya arhamar rahimin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.